Hey friends, and welcome to this preview of our latest Patreon exclusive episode. To continue the conversation and listen to the full episode, head on over to the I Think Therefore I Slam Patreon and sign up to be part of the Slam fam. The link is in the show notes.
Slam poetry.
He doesn't care if it's perfect.
It's time to slam now.
It's the biggest poem I've got inside of me.
She was a thief. You got
To love means to love a haunted house.
yelling, angry.
Blood-black nothingness began to spin.
Specific point of view on
To
things.
this day, I hate pork chops. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
For anyone currently writing to a deadline, remember these magic words. Due tomorrow, do tomorrow. My name's Andrew. Welcome to I Think Therefore I Slam, the podcast bringing you the best spoken word and slam poetry artists from around Australia and around the world. My guest today is a Melbourne-based freelance writer, poet, and writing workshop teacher. She's contributed extensively to publications such as Pearl HQ and Peninsula Essence, covering topics in visual and literary arts, theatre, film, ballet, and opera. She also facilitates the Frankston Writers Salon, where we met. Please welcome Andrea Louise Thomas.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Now, Andrea, I have one question to ask you. Are you more nervous recording this episode today, or were you more nervous when you went on Millionaire Hot Seat a few years ago?
I actually think I'm more nervous now because this means more to me. Poetry is of such a critical part of my life, whereas that's trivia, and I like trivia, but this is not trivia to me.
Gotcha. And you walked away with the grand last time you were on Millionaire Hot Seat.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, I don't have that to offer you. I'm not going to grill you like Eddie did. Thank you for being here, Andrea. Let's launch into your first poetry piece, shall we?
Okay, so this is a piece that I did at the Australian Poetry Slam State Final in 2011. It's called A Call to Arms, and I'm kind of keen when I have the opportunity to do performance poetry, to do pieces that are based around social consciousness and bringing people closer to their shared humanity. I think a lot of time we're sort of separated, more so now than probably ever. And when I read this piece that was written so long ago, I thought, whoa, this is interesting. So it's called A Call to Arms, as in the ones that hang down next to your body. A call to arms. This is not a crusade or a tirade. This is a call to arms, not weapons. The real weapons of mass destruction are those words and phrases whose constructions are designed to demolish identity and abolish diversity. The presumption of superiority is an admission of ignorance. Who amongst us is more than flesh and bone? May people cease to slaughter with words that diminish by putting people in boxes that elongate to coffins in the absence of esteem. We need to redeem our brothers and sisters in all their glorious genetic combinations and resist the temptation to create a comfortable generic. Who amongst us is generic? Stand up and be counted. I don't know about you, but I don't want some watered-down, homogenized, pasteurized, anglicized version of humanity. Advance, Australia fair. Is that the skin we're all supposed to be in? Oh, white Australia is not right, Australia. Do we not all have the right to fight to preserve who we really are? Assimilation is not synonymous with disintegration. We can all have liberty, dignity, and diversity simultaneously. What is a boat person or a refugee but a brave survivor? Who would not do anything to protect family if their home was burning and the bullets were flying? All blood runs red. So if we could look beyond the window dressing, it would be a blessing, because no one can see the color, the gender, or the ethnicity of a soul. If we could remove the ist from our vocabulary, that would be a start. Otherwise, we'll all end up some puff-lipped, pale-faced, surgically modified model of Barbie or Ken. This is not a crusade or a tirade. It is a call to arms. Use them wisely.
Ooh, wow. Written in 2011, but so timely.
Isn't that scary?
Well, I guess some of the best art is kind of timeless in that way. I loved that phrase that you had about the presumption of superiority is admission of ignorance, or words
Is
to
an
that
admission
effect.
of ignorance. I kind of want to put that on a bumper sticker or on a T-shirt and wear it around, you know?
Tattooed on the skin itself, you know what I mean? That's a line.
Hey, that's my line.
That's a line. How did that go at the 2011 final?
It went pretty well. Like, I got to the state final 3 times, and in those 3 times I got 3rd. So I felt pretty good about that.
Yeah.
But also just a bit pissed because, as you know, only the first 2 go forward.
That's right.
So it's a bit
yeah.
of a bummer when you're kind of almost there, almost. But then who knows? Maybe I wasn't ready. Maybe that wasn't my year. Maybe I wasn't meant to do that. But it's funny because I've been out of the scene for a while now, but only now I'm kind of thinking, maybe I should give that another go. Why not?
Come on, dip the toe back in. I know you were there at last year's final where I was competing, and I don't know, did you feel the competitive juices again? Did you want to kind of get up there and storm the stage?
For me, it's not about competition. It's more about sharing, about people. Like in my work, I want people to actually feel seen and heard. Yeah, of course, there's that kind of competitive element. But for me, it's not coming from a place of ego. It's coming from a place of writing things that I think actually will help to elevate people, make people want to be better to one another. We need more neighborliness coming back into society. We're becoming way too separated. I mean, with technology and politics and all that kind of stuff, the world is becoming such a polarized place. And the beauty of performance poetry is we have a platform to try and bring people together, bring the brothers near. You'll hear that line later. And sisters, of course. Yeah.
And that kind of piece, I feel like it's something that anyone could get something out of. Like I said, that was my favorite line that I wrote down there. But there would be something else for someone there, and that's a real strength of when you're writing from that place of unity, I suppose.
Yeah. Like I always say, even if what you're writing is really personal, I think it's very important to make the personal universal. You want people to feel what you've written and what they're hearing. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah, it's just like another language. It's just going to come
or
across as alien. Yeah.
Stuck in a cycle of ego trip.
You got to let other people in.
Yeah, that's right.
Andrea, I'm curious about your origin story. We often dive into this with our guests. What is your origin story of starting to create and share this work of yours?
Well, I've always been a writer since I was very young. I mean, the first book I wrote, I was about 8 years old. But even before that, I preceded that by writing letters to people all around the world. And I loved getting the stamps. That was the most exciting thing to me. Like when I was young, we had pen pals. And so you could get a letter from somewhere, anywhere. And I was like, oh, that's so exciting. And I always asked them, so what's it like for you where you are? Because I guess if you had to describe me in 2 words, it'd be terminally curious. I'm just
like that.
really, really interested in people. So I came about performance poetry in kind of an odd way. My husband died of cancer on New Year's Eve 2005, pardon me. And I found writing, particularly poetry, was an antidote to grief and a balm for me. It was a savior. He was quite a young man. He was only 43. I was 42. Our kids are 3 and 6. And I'd only been in this country 3 years. So that was quite a confronting set of circumstances for me. And I'd heard about this thing called Poetry Idol. And it was the opportunity to go into a library, write a piece, perform it. But the coolest part of Poetry Idol was, A, you got published, and B, if you got into the final, you got to be part of the Melbourne Writers Festival.
Oh, wow.
And I thought that was pretty prestigious.
Definitely.
I thought, wow, that's something else. So that's where I began. So I started writing quite privately, and then I found that getting up and performing and writing pieces that connected to other people was really healing for me. I think the first piece I wrote was a piece called Phoenix, which was about rising from the ashes of my husband's death. And the number of people who came up after me, came up to me afterwards and said, that really resonated with me. Thank you for sharing that. Because this goes back to the personal being universal. You write something and you think, geez, that's awfully personal. Like, is that going to connect to people? Are they going to get that? But everybody has somebody in their life who's passed away. So if offering a poem out into the atmosphere makes that person feel better, how good is that? How good is that? So I got into this Poetry Idol caper, and I got into the finals 3 times in 2010, 2009, 2010, 2011. So I had the chance to present 3 very different pieces. So it all started out with this Poetry Idol business, and getting into the Melbourne Writers Festival really gave me confidence. I thought, gee whiz, to me, that was the pinnacle. I thought, wow. And that gave me a little bit more confidence. And then other festivals came along. There was something called the Overload Poetry Festival. And one thing that was cool about that was that not only did you get to compete individually, but you also got to compete as a team. So we competed against Scotland, and we had this huge screen. And maybe we kind of had a home court advantage because it was our idea, but they really brought it. Scotland had some great, great poets, but of course we won. That was pretty exciting. And then from that, I thought, well, why not go bigger? To me, like, the greatest honor would be perform. First of all, I got to represent my country. That's a huge honor. Yeah. But then I heard about the Australian Poetry Slam, this national competition for poets who perform their work. And I thought, well, why not? I can represent my state. And that was really important to me. So I thought, well, what the heck, I'll give that a go. And the heats are like super nerve-wracking. And as you know, it's like a rush to be one of the first 20 people to sign up, because if you haven't gotten there on time, too bad. And you want that to be somewhere near you. But if you missed out on that one, you got to travel to the Whoop Whoop to give it a shot again.
Sometimes,
damn.
Yeah.
So I tried to get it right the first time around, and I was pretty lucky. So I made it to the state finals in 2010, 2011, and 2014. And then I took a bit of a break because I don't know how you feel, but I find this really nerve-wracking. I'm like shaking, and I get up there and someone once said to me, if it's that nerve-wracking for you, and you're shaking as you get up to the microphone, how do you bring it? And I said, well, I have this trick that I use. And I think, well, if only 12 people from the state are going to get this wonderful opportunity to perform their work, bring it. So the pressure I put on myself is professionalism. I'm thinking it would be unprofessional to blow it. Because if I blow it, I've taken a chance away from someone who might not have blown it.
Yeah, spot on.
So that's kind of the way I go with that. And then when I took a break from the performing, I put more time and effort into writing page poetry. Of course, you don't have the opportunity to mix with people much, so you can get to be a bit of a poetry hermit, and that could be problematic. But I started workshopping with a wonderful poet named Claire Gaskin, and her workshops are fabulous. Not a lot of people, remember I was talking about the salon being limited to 15, 20 people. There weren't a lot of people, which meant everybody had a chance to really be heard. And the feedback I got in those workshops was fabulous. And unfortunately, at the time, I wasn't all that confident. And I'm putting together my first poetry manuscript, and I had to go back and look through my back catalog of what I was writing. And I was in that workshop for about 3 years, I think, 2015, 16, 17, something like that. And as I went back and I looked through the work, I said, Andrea, what's the matter with you? You're so hard on yourself. There's some really good work here. Have a little faith. But that said, you also don't want to get caught in your ego, because then you really have no way to improve. So I never think that what I create is the bee's knees, because I'm thinking, well, that's good. What's next? What's your next level? And just keep bringing it. How else are we going to improve as writers if we don't, challenge ourselves to do that little bit better every single time?
And that ability to be in a small targeted workshop with Claire, I'm sure, was invaluable in terms of just sharpening up whatever it was you were working on at the time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Although I used to get teased all the time because the pieces were very short. Part of the reason the pieces were very short is that I would write it in the 10 minutes before I was getting in the car to get to the workshop, which was a lot, I live on the Peninsula, and I had to drive to Sandringham. So I had to, it took quite a lot of time to get there. And, people would say, you're telling me you just wrote that? I'm like, yeah, first draft. They're like, F you. It's just so funny.
Yeah, love that. A little bit of banter between writers. So it's interesting you talked about taking a break from Australian Poetry Slam. Even this year, like I'm considering not going to heats this year just as a break and because I'm already working on the podcast and whatever. So I can definitely relate to that. But this was about, 12, 15 years ago that you were competing there. What do you feel has changed in the Melbourne poetry or slam scene over that time? You've now seen it over quite a long period of time.
I was a bit bummed that it kind of downsized from what, like the library that I went to see you perform last year.
Yeah.
That was a lot smaller venue. The seating was smaller. Like when I competed here at the State Library of Victoria, there were a lot of eyes looking at you. It was a big deal. And I was a bit sad to see it shrink that way. But what I love about it is that we're seeing more and more new kinds of people getting up and doing pieces, and neurodiverse people and trans people. And I also love that it's inclusive in the whole age. Like we had teenagers competing and people in their 70s competing. It doesn't really matter. There's a beautiful equality in the performance poetry scene. And I think that has actually strengthened, even if the numbers have gotten smaller, the diversity has gotten larger, and I love that. And we need more of that at this time in history.
Absolutely. And you even look at the last 2 years in terms of the national champions. So you had KJ, who's been on the podcast, who was 15, 16 at the time that she won.
Amazing.
You had Rob Waters from Sydney, who we'll be hearing from a little bit later in the season. And last year you had Joe Giles, who, like you said, the age demographic, very different. So you've got this kind of really large spectrum of experiences that are coming to the mic. Did they used to have a heat down Frankston way? Is that right?
Yeah, we had a couple of heats in Frankston. I competed in one of those. It was funny.
You got to bring it back, surely.
It was the only time ever I lost my words. So I had the highest score, and the thing is, the words were right there. I could have picked them up and just carried on. But I thought, no, that's not professional. You need to have this memorized. And I did have it memorized. But I happened to know one of the judges, and I felt so guilty about that could somehow be an advantage to me, that my conscience kicked in, and I just lost my words. I just went blank. That has never, ever happened to me. And I thought, oh, well, serves you right. You should have just said, I know that person.
Yeah.
That was funny.
It's a clash of
and
interests.
again, I got third.
I thought you were going to say you locked eyes with one of the audience members or something and realised that you knew them. Because I know if that would have happened while I'm in the middle of a performance, it would have gone. I would have been like, just been off with the fairies, as they say.
I'm such an obscenely fair-minded person that in the background, somewhere in the back of myself, subconscious is going, you can't win. That wouldn't be right.
2 years ago, when I first competed at the state final, which was at the State Library of Victoria. Now, no shade on the State Library. We're recording this episode at the State Library, but it was very strange because tickets went on sale and we were told that it was sold out like quite quickly. And so there were a few people that would have loved to have come, from my kind of tribe who couldn't go. And then on the night, there were a lot of spare seats. So I don't know what exactly was going on there, but I really.
You're saying it was sold out here or at the other library?
No, I mean at State Library 2023. Yeah, we were. Okay. That was. I don't know if that was a miscommunication, but I look forward to. I've talked on this podcast about wanting every slam event and poetry event to be like people hanging from the rafters, and we're getting there. Everyone brings a different kind of flavour, but you really feel like those finals should be. The big thing. So we'll get there.
Yeah, it's such an honor to perform at the State Library. I thought that was quite awesome. And then, I always wanted to get into the final, not just because I wanted to get into the final, but I thought, Sydney Opera House. Yeah. Whoa, is that not the pinnacle of the arts? I thought, I got to get there one day. So now I'm kind of rubbing my hands together and thinking, come on, just give it one more go. But I think, one thing that people didn't realize earlier on was that, giving one great piece isn't enough. You actually have to have a follow-up piece. So that first time I did it, and I thought, geez, I wish I'd gotten to the final. I went, you're really glad you didn't actually, Andrea, because you didn't have a backup piece. I remember going to, it was actually the Frankston heat, and a guy got up there, and he did a really small poem of all things about his cat. And there was a slam off, and he didn't have anything to follow that up.
No.
Yeah, that was kind of funny heat, that one. But we've had a couple out Frankston way, so I'd have to advocate to the library and say, look, we need to get this back now.
Look, as a former Frankston local, kind of grew up in that area, I'd love to see that, because I think, you can have people from further down the peninsula come up and compete there. And, I think, I'd love to see that. And there's probably people in that area, and some people I've had on the show who live around there who would love that opportunity just to have another thing. So
yeah, somewhere closer. It is a long way to come into the city.
Yeah, it definitely can be. You have a piece called Poets on the Fringe, which we're going to hear at the end of today's episode. Was actually adapted for a short film called Train of Thought, which was shown at the Cannes Film Festival.
It was, amazingly enough.
So what was the story of how that project came together? And you had some experience both behind and in front of the camera for the short film.
For the first time ever.
Yeah, can you tell us about that?
So how that came about was Australian Poetry used to have a program called Cafe Poet. And so in different places all around the city and the suburbs, you could be in a place and be the poet on site, poet on the spot. And I happened to be the Cafe Poet for Australian Poetry at Mornington Peninsula Library. And also I was writing a lot, like I was writing for, Pearl Magazine, and interviewing a lot of artists, and, writing poetry and performing poetry and what have you. And the director, Liam Kelly, when I met him, was 16. He was 17 when he completed this film, which is mind-boggling.
Wow. Yeah.
So anyway, he'd heard about me from my writing reputation, and he came to me at the library and he said, would you be willing to write my next screenplay? And I was like, I'd be honored. Of course I would. Of course. And I said, have you got something in mind? And he said, no, what do you think? And I said, well, how do you feel about poetry in film? And he said, I don't know. Can you give me an example? So I rattled off Poets on the Fringe, and he said, that's it. That's the one.
Yeah,
we're doing that.
Away.
So the working title of it was actually Poets. And I wanted to change it to Train of Thought, because part of the film takes place on a train, Puffin Billy, which is so cool to shoot on the train. And also, it's a stream of consciousness kind of poem. So I thought that was a more suitable title. To me, Poets is too generic. So I said, let's change it to Train of Thought. So now that's up on YouTube under Train of Thought, Poetry in Film. But you need both parts to find it, because there are other things called Train of Thought.
Yes.
So Train of Thought, Poetry in Film.
Great, and we'll have a link for that in the episode description as well. Do you know if Liam is still working in film? Was that his dream?
Oh, yeah. He went on to big things. He entered that film into the Peninsula Short Film Festival. And unfortunately, because he was so young, they put him in the emerging filmmaker category, which made him kind of mad, because the prize to win the whole festival was 10 times the prize.
And he'd already emerged, I'm sure.
He had already emerged.
Yeah,
He was amazing. So he won on the Best Emerging Filmmaker Award. We were even more burned when the director, Rob Connolly, who directed Paper Planes, The Dry, Bilbao. I mean, look into Rob Connolly. He's amazing. And he came up to us and he said, hands down, best film on the night.
Yeah.
And we were like, damn, we could have gotten the top prize.
Yeah. It's kind of like this year's Oscars, where there were a few kind of weird categories maybe where they shouldn't have been,
Yeah, I really think they need to have a category for performance poetry.
Well, I believe
poetry and film.
I believe there's now a Grammy category for that, so we're getting closer.
Ooh, that's fantastic.
I believe that's the case. Yeah,
I didn't know that. So he won that. We got a lot of really good feedback. I think the funniest one was a couple of years before that, I had interviewed the actor Samuel Johnson, and I love Sam. He's just so much.
He's Sam Johnson.
He's so much fun, and he's such a nice guy. He's like a really beautiful, accessible person. And he came up to me afterwards. He goes, Andrea, I'm so relieved I didn't have to lie and tell you I liked that. That was awesome. And he picked out one particular line, and I thought, wow, he really was paying attention. And just the fact that people were so excited about a poem in a film that it got them all jazzed up about poetry. I'm like, wow, totally met my mission, man.
And you, like we said, you spent some time in front of the camera as well. You were involved at many, many different levels. So was that a bit of a thrill? Yeah.
Never done that before. And again, it goes back to that professionalism thing, because, our actress, Ella, was a professional actress. I'm like, I'm not going to stand across from this woman and blow this. So we kind of did this. It was sort of a free form thing. We didn't actually have lines. We just started talking to one another, and we engaged in an argument, and it really looked like an argument, because she was bringing things up, and I thought, wow, this really resonates with my teenage daughter. And it actually all went really, really, really well. I was way more nervous about that. Being in front of the camera, it's not my jam.
Well, it is a great short film and very polished. So everyone should definitely check it out. Hope you enjoyed this preview clip. To continue the conversation and listen to the entire episode, head over to the I Think Therefore I Slam Patreon. The link is in the show notes.